Hi there, and welcome to the NGINX Coffee Klatch. From German, the term Kaffee Klatch means coffee and gossip. And while we don't have our coffee with us today, or at least I don't, I'm drinking tea instead, but the name, as it is, implies that this is an informal chat. I'm Dave McAllister, Open Source Technologist for NGINX, part of F5. And with me today is Damian Curry. Damian, give us a quick background on yourself.
Yeah, hi. Like Dave said, my name is Damian Curry. I currently run the Community and Alliances team for NGINX at F5. I've been with NGINX just over 9 years now, ever since back in the startup days. And before that, I came up as a sysadmin, then called DevOps, then called Platform Ops or SRE. You kind of name it. I've had that title and have been a user of NGINX since back in probably about 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. And it became very quickly one of my go-to tools for, anything in the network stack that I needed a little bit of help with. And, from starting out as just wanting to replace Apache to, being able to use it as a load balancer and a caching system, was a part of pretty much every infrastructure I worked in or built ever since I first came across it.
It's kind of interesting. I'm wearing my SRE Day shirt as well, so I've got a little bit of a background in that space. Not quite your level of experience with the NGINX web server project, but NGINX web server did start as open source and has been open source pretty much. But I'm going to ask you to expand that view a little bit. What is your view of the open source software world at NGINX these days?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it is at the core of NGINX. Is it was a kind of pet project started by Igor to solve a problem, and just kind of snowballed from there and became such a popular piece of technology that, I mean, now runs a significant chunk of the internet. Um, at NGINX and at F5, we really do kind of recognize that this is, with this history, it is a very important piece. And there wouldn't be a commercial offering if there wasn't an open source product that was behind it that is so popular.
And that's kind of interesting. We do make jokes. There are definitely technologies that if they break, the world as we know it breaks. And NGINX kind of falls. NGINX open source core project kind of falls into that category. But I know that as much as we know about the web server project, there are other open source projects at NGINX. What hidden gems should people go check that you are aware of?
Oh man, there's a lot of interesting ones out there. One of the little projects that was kind of a random idea that came out of our team that is out on GitHub and became really popular is our S3 Gateway project. It is a just kind of a lightweight deployment methodology for NGINX to sit in front of an object store and give you that more flexibility for authentication and authorization, and ensuring that you're able to share those artifacts with where they need to be. One of the other ones that's really kind of near and dear to my heart is our Ansible roles. It's maybe
Yes.
not necessarily a standalone open source project, but coming from my background, I am a huge, huge fan of automation. I always joked that my goal was to automate myself out of a job, and I did in a lot of cases. So, having that tool to make it easier for people to manage their NGINX open source and plus instances is a super powerful tool. And I mean, one of the ones that's a little bit probably better known is our Ingress controller implementation.
Mhm.
Uh, Everybody knows, Ingress NGINX, which is the kind of default Ingress controller for Kubernetes, which I always was interesting naming convention because while it is NGINX core, it's actually built on OpenResty, which is a fork of NGINX, and it has a great community behind it. They've done a lot of really good work, but it's nice to have that pure NGINX option as well. And it's a lot of people don't realize that there is a difference between the two, or that there is more than one.
That's actually very true. And my space, I'm deep into observability and open telemetry, and people don't realize that there are two NGINX Open Telemetry modules as well.
Yeah, that's actually another real good one that I completely blanked on there for a minute. Yeah, the Open Telemetry module is another great example of, not that there is anything wrong with the community built one. It's just kind of built for kind of a different solution, right?
Yeah.
And built with a kind of different ideas in mind and a different level of of of, uh, of detail, I guess you could say. So it's always good to have the multiple options, because not there's no one solution that's going to solve
Right.
everyone's problems.
Yeah, that's why we have other things other than just NGINX out there running the world's web
Mhm.
as well. But yeah, originally when we think about the way and the problem that the 10K problem that NGINX set out to solve, being performance, reliability, and stability, I think that the modules you mentioned kind of fall into that same category. They
Yeah.
focus on performance, they focus on reliability and stability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being lightweight, being high performant, that is always at the core of, I mean, everything NGINX does. I know we always used to love to talk about how you could actually take NGINX and run it off a diskette if you really wanted to. I mean, granted, it was pretty stripped down, not a lot of modules, but it is that small. The binary was under what, 2.5 megabytes. So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing that such a small piece of software that was started, I mean, almost 20 years ago now, or it is
Pretty
20
close.
years ago now,
Yeah.
is still such a core piece of technology. And it was interesting. I remember when, Docker was really coming out and getting a lot of traction. A lot of people were saying the first application run in Docker was NGINX.
Wow. Wow, that's actually really cool. That's an interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, from a tool that was designed to solve a hardware problem to being a tool that is running containers everywhere is kind of amazing to think about and look back on how it's stayed so relevant in the technology landscape.
Yeah, and it's also grown as the web has changed. So it's gone from serving web pages to serving applications to all of the different aspects that it does.
Yeah.
But you're involved in a lot of open source, not just here as well, and you've got an interesting series of backgrounds. I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your favorite open source non-NGINX project?
It's really hard to narrow it down to one thing. Obviously, I'm a big fan of all of the automation toolings, and a lot of the things that are really interesting now will live in that kind of CI/CD
Mhm.
space. So whether you're looking at tools like Argo or any of that automation, all those projects are really Interesting to me. I've tried to be involved with the CD Foundation as much as I can, and really trying to bring more of that standardization and make it easier for people to adopt some of the really powerful things you can do with that automation and with that CI/CD pipeline, and just bringing that information out to the front, and also kind of trying to break down those lines between your traditional app dev side of the house and your traditional kind of system side of the house. I dealt with a lot of that back being, when I was a old school sysadmin, and it was always the most painful thing, is just having that kind of butting heads with the teams, when you really, it's so much better if you can just work together and use that same tooling and try to have consistency across your environments. It makes for easier development, easier production rollouts, and also, probably more importantly than rollouts, is rollbacks. That was always the key thing. Is it's so much easier to, as everybody likes to say, move fast and break things when you can get back to a known good state when you do accidentally break something.
The next one, I'm going to break away from the sort of technology and product basis here. Over the last year or so, there's been a lot of interesting times for open source, between seeing companies relicense things, projects being abandoned, security concerns, and even more potential security concerns coming into the open source world. But as you pointed out, I hate to say this, the world kind of depends on open source these days.
Yeah.
Companies depend on open source these days. So, how should companies be involved in supporting open source and these projects?
Yeah, it's a really interesting and difficult space. There's that open source nerd in me that's like, you can't change licensing, keep it open source. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's how this all started. That's how these tools grew and became popular. But then at the same time, people have to make a living, and whether it's you know projects that maybe are kind of taken advantage of by larger companies and turn them into a SaaS offering, and not doing much to either kind of give back or support the core developers, I can also understand why people are wanting to do those licensing changes. So it's a really difficult thing, and I'm hoping we can find a good balance in between, because we've seen with so many different, these tiny building blocks that seem so insignificant by themselves, that are developed and maintained by a single person. And if they abandon it or it goes away, it has a bug, it breaks a lot of stuff. So we really need to figure out, how do we support these, especially the more insignificant projects as people
Yeah,
kind of see them, right? Everybody gives a ton of attention to, all the fun, fancy new stuff like Kubernetes, right? Which, don't get me wrong, I love Kubernetes. But there's all of these kind of core building blocks that everybody uses, and they probably don't even know is there. I mean, everybody forgets that, OpenSSL.
right.
What would we do without that? Or, SSH even. Like, there's so many of these little tools that get developed and maintained and are even more core to everything than NGINX. I mean, NGINX powers a lot of the internet, but you can't do anything with NGINX if you can't get into your server to maintain it or deploy it. Or, you can't run NGINX very well if you don't have OpenSSH to do that encryption and decryption. So while it's also important to, make sure we get development efforts and money behind these big, shiny, new, amazing pieces of technology, we also need to figure out a way of, how can we support these small pieces that are so easy to forget about, but when something goes wrong, the the out the fallout is just insane, how big it can get.
Yeah, yeah, and we've seen some of those things happen over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And you're right. People tend to look at this as the big fancy projects, and NGINX supports them. We have foundations, we have engineers that work on them,
Mhm.
but sometimes it's those little projects that just come up and get you as
Yeah.
well. So as we kind of get to this, we've been talking a little bit about open source, and um, a lot of people are familiar with it, but how would you advise somebody who wanted to start working with open source today to get started?
I mean, the best advice I can give is just go out and do it. Start playing with stuff. To be a member and an important member of the open source community doesn't necessarily mean you're committing code to projects. I mean, even just asking a question online and having somebody else answer it, that is a huge contribution to the community, because somebody else is going to find that. Personally, I don't think I've ever really officially contributed any code to a specific project, but I put code out there. I mean, I've built things, put it out on GitHub, and if somebody stumbles across one of the weird projects I worked on and goes, "Oh man, that's how that works."
Right.
I mean, that's so important to moving things forward and having information out there so that people can solve their problems, and that they can, learn more. And, I mean, I that's how I kind of came up in open source as well. It was, I just started doing it. I just started playing with Linux, got more and more interested in it. I always loved playing with networks and figuring out how networking worked, mainly so, me and my friends could play video games together. And then from there, it just, kind of snowballs, and managed to, find a spot in it and learn a lot over the years from a lot of people who I, owe a lot to, and, communities out there that aren't asking for much back, but they just being out there, asking questions, answering questions. Maybe if you don't even know if you have the entire correct answer, just putting it out there and, giving people things to try. It means so much to the community at large. So then the next person who starts out and is struggling and doesn't know what to do, they might be able to stumble across that and, figure it out before they give up and go, man, maybe open source isn't for me. I'll go back to doing it the easy way maybe, or, just using the stuff that we know works rather than going through and, trying to figure stuff out and build stuff for fun.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because I always viewed that open source was designed for people who had a problem they needed to solve. And so what we now see is that not only can you use other people's work to help solve your problem, you can also extend your solution to be able to solve other people's problems as well, which is an incredibly important thing.
Yeah, because chances are, if you hit a problem, you're probably not the first one who's run into that same problem or, tried to find a solution to it. I know it was always the most frustrating thing I can think of is when you would have a problem and you're researching it, trying to find a solution, and then you find, a Stack Overflow page that has you're like, oh, I found my exact error. And the original poster comes back and just posts, okay, never mind, figured it out. That was always the
Yeah.
most frustrating. It's like, no, what? How? Please let me know, because I'm running into this exact same thing. So, even just sharing that answer, you may think like, oh no, this is just my problem. Nobody else is going to see this. Chances are
Right.
somebody else has seen it or is going to see it in the future.
Yep. So as we're wrapping up here, any last thoughts that you'd like to share with us about open source, your role, or, I don't know, your dogs or cats?
I mean, I'm just so happy I was able to, get into the open source world and, you know, have all these tools and different things and, find these amazing communities of people who want to help you learn and want to help teach you and, get out there and figure stuff out. I've always just loved solving problems. That's always been what's driven me is fixing something that's broken, or, trying to come up with a better way to do something, or maybe improve it a little bit. And I feel indebted to the community, right? If it wasn't for this weird community of people that just like to write code and put it out there, I mean, we wouldn't have all the amazing things we have in the world today.
Thank you, Damian, for coming on, sharing your insights and advice with us today. It has actually been really illuminating learning about the history behind what's going on and how people have adopted this. And thank all of you for joining us today and meeting some of the people behind the power of open source. If you have your own thoughts and ideas, feel free to add them to the comments. Until next time, may the open source be with you.